Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Charlie's Unimog workshop. This is going to be a little bit of a side note to a little series I'm going to do on building cabinets. These are the cabinets, the carcasses. I think I mentioned in a previous video. I'm building this in two pieces so that I can get it into the camper, and then if I need to work on something, I can remove a piece at a time and get things in and out without having to deconstruct the whole thing. So I've got the carcasses built up. I built the face frames. A lot of, in the videos that's coming, I'll talk a lot about the material selections that are a little bit unusual for cabinetry, but to try to keep weight down and that sort of thing, I've made some unusual selections. One of which I'm going to use, you can see I've got a lot of drawers to make, and that's what's coming up next. And this video is about routers and router selection and the apparent absence of industry standards among routers. And I hope this is interesting for some of you where you maybe have a router that you think is working fine, but maybe there's some features in other routers that you might find useful. So I'm going to talk about those. But mostly this is about, I'm going to be making shaker style drawer fronts and cabinets that'll look something like this, but better. This is all scrap wood and just trying to get the router bits to work. And this is where I started running into issues with my router. So let's go over to the wood shop and we'll talk more about that. Okay, we're over in the wood shop now, and I've got 4 routers, and of course there's a story with every one. I never set out to have 4 routers, but here we are. So about the year 2000, give or take, early 20s, I bought these 2 routers because I was doing some cabinetry for the first time, trying my hand. And I built a nice piece of furniture. I used this one mostly for dovetails and edging, and I wanted to have one to permanently mount to my router table. Mostly for taking, I needed one with a 1/2-inch collet so that I could take, the big giant, this is for a raised panel door. And I can tell you this thing spinning at 25,000 RPM is pretty spooky as you're hoping the wood doesn't fly back at you. Anyway, my problem was this really is wiggly. And I remember doing some things, I was in my early 30s. I was, probably more willing to take a chance than I am now. And I made some things work that were a little on the sketchy side. I'm not willing to do that anymore. So this thing is wiggly on the, it's a plunge router. So, as it, you can take a long bit and feed it, into your work. It's all the way up now. You can feed it into your work and then drive around and then bring it back out. Which is nice, but you can see it's a wiggly mess. And when you're trying to do precise work, you can't do it realistically. So back to the list here. So these 2 I bought to do cabinet work. This one I was having trouble with, so I wanted to put a more higher quality router on the router table. So my first pass was to put this Craftsman up there and use one of these others for the dovetailing, because dovetailing, it just needs to have it doesn't need as much power. This is my most powerful router. So I got this all set up, and I did a base plate for the router table, which you can see now looks like Swiss cheese. There's a story there. So I got this all mounted up to the router table, only to find that the collet for this one is different than the others, even the other craftsmen. So then I had to start looking for alternatives. So I had this one hanging around. This one was my father's, and it's a good old router. It's a workhorse. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then this one over here is a Bosch that was given to me by a friend who bought it, used it once, and decided he was probably going to die using it. So he decided he didn't want it. It was too scary for him. So now I have 4. Well, so I don't have a 1/2-inch collet for this one. I went online, and of course this machine is obsolete and I can't find a 1/2-inch collet for it. Okay, so back to the drawing board. This is now set back up for dovetails, which we'll talk about in the series video, building cabinets. And actually this is it does a decent job. Again, this is scrap wood, just trying to get things set up, but it can make a nice joint. We'll talk about getting that set up in the series video. So I said, all right, let's look at these others. Well, the old Craftsman, I also don't have a 1/2-inch collet for. I didn't even get that far because this one, the way that the height is set, there's a tightening knob here, and then you slide it into place. There's a little dial over here. There's no fine adjustment. And so you set it by a scale. There's a scale on the side. You set it to the scale, and if you need to adjust, you look at the scale and say, well, I need to go 1/32 of an inch, and that's one little white stripe, and you tighten it down. And of course it moves every time you tighten it down. So it's not really good for precision depth. So I didn't want to go through the hassle of getting that working. So that brought me to the Bosch. Okay, so it wouldn't fit. So the Bosch is an interesting one. Actually, it's hard to be afraid of this one. It actually starts with this handle in place. So it's a nice tool to work with. You've got a really good grip on it. But now with it going on the router table, don't need that. But then the next problem is these base plates. Now, so I'm thinking, I thought these base plates were all pretty similar. And I know Harbor Freight, it's goofy, but I never even looked at it because I just mounted it on the Harbor Freight router table 20 years ago. So now I see that there's a couple of differences. The two Craftsman and the Bosch are all 6-inch diameter base plates, which that's handy if you're doing pattern work, or I have a fixture that I use for dados and rabbits that have 2 rails that are separated such that I can put a 1/2-inch bit in here and plow through and make a 3/4 inch rabbet so that like shelves fit into each other and that sort of thing. I did a lot of that in my early woodworking days. But now the Harbor Freight has a 6 1/4. Interesting. It doesn't really matter because again, I'm not using this for anything right now, but it was an interesting observation. But that came later. What came first is, you notice the screw pattern, 3 holes, 3 holes, 3 holes, 4 holes, sorry. There's 4 mounting screws for the Harbor Freight. So I had to go and make a 3-hole pattern in this plate that had the 4 holes for the Harbor Freight. So this was on this router. I then went and mounted this router up, laid out the holes, got them drilled, got them ready to go, mounted it, and then found I had the collet problem. Don't want to use this on the router table, so that only leaves the Bosch. Well, Bosch has a 4-hole pattern. You would think maybe it would be the same. Maybe there's a standard 4-hole pattern. No, these two are different. And in fact, this is different and has metric threads. So I don't have an abundance of number 4 countersunk head screws hanging around. So rather than go driving around to hardware stores or fishing around on Amazon, I did find that there's a second set of holes that were untapped. Hey, great. So I tapped those for 1032s. But of course, those 3 holes are on a different diameter than these. There's no standards here. They're all different. So now this looks like Swiss cheese. It's gonna work. I'm confident now that it'll work. I had to really strategically place these in a way that I didn't have 2 holes on top of each other. You can see there's holes all over the place. But I needed to get that mounted in a way that I can still have the controls facing me so I can make adjustments to the height. So that's all work. So that was really the point of this is, even the guide bushings here, when you are using a template, you use a guide bushing, and that keeps so you can drive the router around a template. But here we have 3 different makes of router and 3 different methods of attaching guide bushings. So this is all really about, if you're going to buy a router, or if you have a router and you're going to buy another router, that's probably more important. These are some of the differences that you might want to look for to say, do you want to, you may or may not have to stick with a brand, but at least there's going to be some characteristics that you want to make sure are the same as the brand you already have. This is a mistake I made. Of course, I didn't know it until here I am. But thought this would be an interesting video for some people who might be looking at getting some new machines for their wood shop. Again, I'm going to be putting a video set together to build these drawers and kind of wrap up the building of those cabinets. If you like this content, please hit a like so that I know that what I'm doing is appreciated. And if you want to know when that video comes out, hit subscribe. That helps too. And we'll see you probably in a week or so. All right, thanks. Thanks for watching.